Welcome to Crossover the Pond, brought to you by 21 Media Productions and Sports Social. He's Drew Lasker, I'm Josh Sexton, and this is episode 3 as we continue our NBA basketball journey, a short, hezzy tween and stutter step away over here in the UK. Except this week, we've got a man on the inside, Mr. Drew Lasker. He's reporting live from Los Angeles after attending Intuit Dome in Inglewood. Well, last night for us, not quite last night yet for Drew, I don't think, or maybe just actually, just past midnight there. So we're going to get his thoughts on the Clippers' state-of-the-art arena and dive a little bit deeper into what is going wrong with my team right now because they lost again last night to make it 5 straight, which is very disappointing, but we will get into that in more depth. We'll also discuss the Dallas Mavericks. Are they waving the white flag? Like put in there, Drew, to tank already. And everybody from the 313, put your hands up and follow me because Detroit basketball is back, baby. That plus our understated story of the last week and bold predictions for the next week of NBA basketball to come in today's episode. But first, Drew, live from Los Angeles, you were in the building for the visit of the Atlanta Hawks, the glorious Atlanta Hawks last night. How was the experience before we go deeper into the Clippers?
Man, so let me just paint the picture. So I have my Waze map on, driving to the Inglewood where the stadium is located, and it says it's 2 minutes away, but then I start to get concerned because I'm like, I don't see anything. Usually when you like 5 minutes away from a big arena, you kind of see it in the distance. And so I hook a left. It says 1 minute. And I'm like, man, I must have put the wrong address in. And then I hit a right. And these blue lights are just gazing at me. And it's like, oh, just incredible. Like the sight straight off the rip. So quickly park the car, walk down. And man, this place, the technology in this place is unreal. So before, I had to scan my face, add my credit card to my account, and everything is just Face ID. Literally, as soon as I walk up to the gate, hi Drew, welcome in. I like no, don't show a ticket, nothing, and walk around the place just to get a feel for it. And it dawned on me, I was like, this reminds me of something, but I keep walking, can't really think about what it reminds me of. And then finally, it clicks. It is a 2025 newer version of the O2 Arena.
Nice.
It's about 10 times better than the O2 Arena because the actual basketball court is inside a dome. And man, this place is just beautiful. It's immaculate. Like when you walk inside the arena, it is so steep. Like there isn't a bad seat in the house. I literally got a point of view from every single section. Not a bad seat. The wall looks incredible. Just the lights are bright. What a place. Amazing, amazing, amazing. Shout out to Steve Ballmer. Shout out to the city of Inglewood. They've really built that area up. Obviously, the Los Angeles Chargers, or Rams, play across the street. It's incredible. I just found it weird. I thought to myself, let me go grab some nachos. And I asked the lady what I do. And she just said, oh, just bring your phone. I'll bring my phone out the pocket. The gate opens, go grab my popcorn, grab a beer, and just walk out. Incredible. Like the technology is out of this world.
Yeah, absolutely incredible. I'm like you. I went 4 times last season, I think it was actually, and the Clippers won 4 times in a row, which is always nice as well. And I got perspectives from every part. I even sat in the wall for a little bit, which was like felt like a little bucket list thing for me to be able to do as a big Clippers fan. So that was very fun. I sat right next to the guy with the drum, so it was loud, but it was a very good experience. But unfortunately, Drew, the first topic on this tale of the tape for our crossover the pond is the LA Clippers look old and bad. And I want to get your thoughts on this first, Drew, before I give mine, because I imagine I'm going to go fairly long on mine. But you've now seen my team up close and personal. So what have you noticed that isn't working so well? Because, listen, there's obviously injuries. Kawhi Leonard's injured again. It feels like Groundhog Day again for Clippers fans being able to say that. They've said he's going to miss the next couple of games now. That came out before the Atlanta game last night, and Bradley Beal is missing time too. So, like the injuries are one thing. there still needs to be, we talked about the depth of this team once they made the acquisitions in the summer. And, what did you notice, Drew, that you thought wasn't working up close and personal?
Yeah, well, firstly, let me just go to what stood out to me in the numbers before I watched this game. I just kind of dug deep into them. They are the oldest team in the league, an average age of 30. They have the fifth worst defense in the NBA, and they're the worst in the league at turning the ball over. So those are the things that I was just kind of keying in on as I went to watch this game live. But what really stood out to me as I'm in the building, first of all, it was just sad to see Chris Paul at the end of the bench in warmups got a DNP for the second night in a row. He was sat next to Kawhi Leonard. Very little engagement from both, which I found it kind of odd. I thought Chris Paul would be like the coach, on the bench that's constantly in every single huddle. He wasn't involved in many. Neither was Kawhi, which really surprised me. It felt kind of standoffish. So right away, the thing that stuck out to me was a little bit of lack of leadership. But in reality, besides everything I just mentioned about your Clippers, the biggest thing is, and I talked about defense, it's really offense. There are no threats on this team. Like, I'm looking at the roster and I'm thinking, okay, where are the points going to come from? They obviously got off to a fast start here tonight. They were up like 10-2, but I kept saying to myself, it never felt sustainable. They went to Zubac really early, and he got off to a great start. And then they tried to force feed him throughout the game, and it just wasn't working. And I just kept thinking, like, where are they going to get their points from? Obviously, James Harden had 35, 11, and 10, a triple-double, but it felt really quiet. A lot of that didn't happen until the second half, and he shot 2 air balls, which it just felt like it takes a lot of dribbling for him. It takes a lot of dribbling for him to score, which takes away from everyone else. Everyone else is really stagnant. But then at the same time, I'm like, who else are you going to put the ball in the hands of? There's nobody. So as bad as this team's defense is, I'm really concerned about the lack of scoring threat. He had 35. The next highest score was 13. That's really odd in the NBA, isn't it? I mean, you usually have multiple guys that's, scoring over 15 points at least. And so, only 4 guys in double figures. I really think this team should really focus on the new era and blow it up. And really, with this new class that's coming in, you got 4 legitimate number 1 picks. They got to get one. I don't know what their draft situation looks like. You would know better than me. But they got to focus on the future because this roster is not winning a damn thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've hit the nail on the head for me, and I want to start on that Chris Paul and Kawhi Leonard point as well, because one of the things that I think is a problem that bleeds into the basketball really, but comes from the culture of the LA Clippers is a nonchalant and like laid back attitude that is
Yes.
across the franchise. It comes from Ty Lue down. Like Ty Lue is a coach who is like a cool guy, but there are times to not be cool as well. And at Ty Lue's, coolness never spills into like passion. His coolness, when it is anger, spills into like just cutting off journalists. And I've not necessarily seen behind the scenes of the players because, as I say, whenever I've gone to cover them as a journalist, even though you get close to the coaches and the players, I'm not allowed access to the locker room, for example. I've also not seen the Clippers lose many, so I've been quite fortunate whenever I've gone as a journalist. But I don't imagine he's there like calling out players and things like that, because one of the things that players who've been coached by Ty Lue say is that he's a player's coach. So I can't imagine he's like calling out guys. James Harden is a very, very nonchalant star. He's one speed. It's like you say, Drew, that he can put up 35 points quietly, but they're not going to be 35 aggressive points as such. They're not necessarily going to come in like a fast run where he's hitting loads of threes and getting really hot, or driving to the basket and knocking down defenders on the way and getting blocking fouls off them and things like that. That just doesn't feel like the James Harden of today, because he's older and his body is not necessarily up to that sort of standard. You look at when he was on the Rockets, and like those muscles were like popping out the jersey. Like when you look back at that James Harden now, it's hard to believe that people used to question his physicality and things like that, because the physicality was absolutely there. And then similar with Kawhi Leonard, Kawhi has maybe never been that guy who is going to be like your passionate star. Even on Toronto, he was like the quiet, unassuming star. But Toronto had Kyle Lowry as his second in command, who is one of the loudest seconds in command you could ever wish to have, who was very in guys' faces and stuff. And the Clippers have just never really had that guy. They've got aggressive defenders on this team, but even they appear to have taken more of a backseat this season. The likes of Chris Dunn and Derek Jones Jr. have not necessarily come to the party defensively yet. And then you've mentioned the offense, things that worked well for the Clippers last season, like going to Zubac, but they were able to mix it up with the coverages of Zubac, and how he was getting his paint touches and things like that. And this season again, it appears to become tunnel visioned and one speed, and it's such a concern because the NBA, and I want to come on to talk about this with the Detroit Pistons later in the show anyway, Drew, but it feels like the NBA is coming towards being sort of younger and more athletic, and the Clippers actively chose to get older in the summer. And my biggest concern now is whether this is actually a playoff team, even a play-in team, even, because it's not young and athletic. There isn't that ability for them to switch it up and suddenly be bursting into the paint past all these quick defenders that are up and down the Western and Eastern Conference these days. It just feels like the Clippers have guys who can settle, and if the 3-point shot's going on any given night, the Clippers may be able to just win the numbers game. But if it isn't, and you saw again last night that James Harden was the only guy who had it going, then it's going to look bad, and the Clippers are going to look one speed, and they're not going to look young, and they're not going to look hungry, and they're not going to look aggressive, because they are absolutely none of those things.
I will say this. The person on that bench, because that's a great point about the nonchalantness of the entire staff. There was one person on the staff that stood out to me. I want you to have a guess of who you think that would be.
Big JVG.
Van Gundy?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Van Gundy was really, really engaged throughout the game. He really stood out to me. Other than that, it was just, everyone was just kind of just there. I mean, even Kawhi with a hat and a hoodie on, I didn't even know he was there at first, because he just didn't stand out, because he was incognito. And I'm like, you're the franchise player. With all of that being said, let's give the franchise some credit from a marketing standpoint. They're trying to build something there. They're really going out their way to build their brand, because we all know it's a Laker town. So you can tell, like, through all the razzmatazz, they're going the extra mile with the wall, with the dances they have littered throughout the arena, just trying to get everyone hype. And so, shout out to that. Because I was observing and looking at everything, and I was like, one day when this franchise finally wins, if they can ever get close to winning a championship, like, they have everything in place now to really maximize the opportunity. So, but that roster, you're right. I look at Atlanta, who has the third youngest team. And although there was no one that really stood out, Porzingis stood out, but I always thought that every guy on the court could be a threat at attacking the rim. I didn't get that feeling with the Clippers.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll move on before I go into full rant mode. I've got my own Clippers podcast to be doing that, so I won't bore you, Drew. I won't send you to sleep when you're already tired enough, given the time difference and the travel at this stage. So we'll move on to look at the Dallas Mavericks, who I've titled this section as the Dallas Mavericks look younger than the Clippers, yet maybe badder. I honestly had Dallas down as something of a sleeper team this year, Drew. I don't think I was alone, based on them drafting Cooper Flag and going into the season with a healthy AD. And listen, there's only so long a healthy AD can last. And once again, we're finding that out the hard way. But a lot of the same guys around the edges, like PJ Washington and guys that even me personally as a Clippers fan have seen give the Clippers problems down the years. Derek Lively, who looks like a great center, who is having injury issues again this season after having them last season. So even the guys around the edges aren't necessarily coming to the party again. So where do you think, at least in terms of the on-court, it's going wrong for Jason Kidd's team?
Well, the decision that he made in the preseason to move Cooper Flag to the point guard position, and his quote was, "I want to have him ready for when the games matter in April." Well, news alert, the Dallas Mavericks are going to be scouting universities and European teams across the world in April because they're going to be a lottery team. I mean, let's just call a spade what it is. This team stinks, and it's really affecting Cooper Flag. I don't know what his numbers were tonight. I know a couple nights ago he had 28. Not sure what he had against Milwaukee. They lost by 2 in that matchup, but he just does not look comfortable, and that is I'm speaking from experience. That is a very difficult transition to move to point guard. Point guards can transition to twos, but it's damn near impossible for a two to transition over to a point guard. Notice that I said a two guard. You don't usually have 3 men or 4 men, whatever you want to label Cooper Flag, trying to be a point guard. And so it's taken away from his aggressiveness. It's taken away from his confidence. He doesn't have that mojo. And then when you look at the team overall, it's what we all saw coming. Like, this team stays hurt. They've already missed 29 games. Players that's missed a total combined 29 games, which is top 5 in the league with most games missed. And then when you look at their age, 6th oldest team, which that kind of surprised me. But actually, when you really look at it, they are kind of old. But more importantly, their statisticals numbers have them as a bad team. When you're last in offensive rating, you're last in offensive rebound rate. So that means that your offense isn't really good, so you're missing a lot of shots. You don't get an opportunity to get a second go at it like the Rockets, who have a 40% offensive rebounding rate. So, they got almost a 50% chance of getting the ball back and getting another crack at it. And then your effective field goal percentage is last. That equals a bad team. And so Anthony Davis, him coming back isn't going to help. Kyrie coming back isn't going to help because Kyrie's going to need time to adjust from the ACL tear, which I'll predict he'll come back probably February, March. By then, it will just be getting his confidence back for the following season, because by then, the Dallas Mavericks season will be done.
Well, you've touched on some of the stats there, Drew. I want to drill a little bit further down into them. Not to feel like it's the Hamburglar Simpsons thing that he's already dead, but as you mentioned there, the biggest suggestions would be that they're missing a proper playmaker. D'Angelo Russell currently has a team high 5.1 assists per game. The next after him is Derek Lively with 3. Your center is your second best playmaker, and outside shooting is a problem for them too. Max Christie and Jaden Hardy, the only guys shooting above 30% from outside, which, you referenced it with the Clippers before. If you're an NBA team, to have only 2 guys shooting above 30% from 3 is very, very bad. And they're second to last as a team in terms of percentage makes from deep. So that's just never going to get it done. And, we're going to talk about how the NBA is transitioning away from these things as well. People are able to, mix up offense these days, but the Mavericks don't have that. And especially without Anthony Davis, they don't have that. But the truth of the matter is, Drew, you've mentioned it there, Anthony Davis doesn't fix this, because one thing that Anthony Davis does, and it was a problem when he was on the Lakers, and I'm kind of not surprised that the Lakers are find themselves in a better situation, even with a guy like DeAndre Ayton now, who comes with his own issues, because the one thing DeAndre Ayton wants to do is get to the basket. He has a mid-range, of course he does, but he's not that much of a settler. Anthony Davis doesn't trust his body, is a guy who settles in the mid-range, is a guy who settles for 3, is a guy who doesn't use his body to work his way into the paint, and is a guy who doesn't get to the basket. And it ends up being a similar issue to the Clippers for the Dallas Mavericks, except the one thing I will give the Clippers credit for is that they still have a couple guys who can hit that ball from deep. The Dallas Mavericks absolutely don't have that, as the stats suggest. And then you've referenced it with Kyrie Irving as well. Like I've heard some commentators in the space ask if Kyrie Irving fixes a lot of these teams' ills. I think they were debating on the Zach Lowe podcast last week. But the thing I keep thinking with that, and it doesn't necessarily apply when it's both their stars missing with AD and Kyrie, but the best teams should have the basics like 3-point shooting and playmaking covered. If one guy is out, if it's just Kyrie Irving out on any given night, and by the way, the Dallas Mavericks were still bad when it was just Kyrie Irving out, you should have 3-point shooting and playmaking covered. We shouldn't be looking at it as though let's say that Kyrie Irving is in that three guys with Max Christie and Jaden Hardy as guys shooting over 30%. It still shouldn't be three guys shooting over 30% from deep. It still shouldn't be just Kyrie Irving and D'Angelo Russell with over 5 assists per game. There should be more than that if you've built out a proper roster. So I'm similar to the way I was with the Clippers, Drew. I'm questioning the roster construction of this Dallas Mavericks team.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the assists for the Clippers. They actually had 19, Atlanta had 30, and I feel the same way about the Clippers. James Harden is their really only playmaker, and in today's game, you got to have multiple guys who can get downhill and spray out to shooters in the opposite corner, which Dallas, they don't have any shooters to pass it out to. PJ Washington is supposed to be one, but I think Cooper Flag is going to continue to struggle, especially when Anthony Davis comes back into the fold, because, this team is shooting poorly, which means the defense is going to pack the paint. And Flag and Anthony Davis kind of work in the same space. They both like the mid-range area. And, I just don't see how that relationship is going to coexist. There's been chatter today or yesterday about Nico Harrison getting fired. And if that happens, to me, I think it's a slap in the face to the Mavericks organization fan base, because it's like, well, what was the point of the trade then if you don't even let the GM make it through 6 months of the season? So they're in a lot of flux right now. I don't, like you mentioned, Kyrie Irving, he doesn't solve a lot of the issues that they have at the moment. Maybe he's that score creator, but he's not necessarily creating for others. And that's if he's coming back and going to look like the same person that we saw before, and we don't know. A lot of questions for Dallas Maverick fans, and I can guarantee that Cooper Flag probably he wishes he went to Washington or Utah somewhere.
I love this being brutal on the other Texas teams. True, it's not lost on me. I can appreciate it when it comes.
Which gives me
Dallas
time
Mavericks.
for my soliloquy on my Houston Rockets, baby. Balling out. I'll get to that later.
We absolutely love it. We absolutely love it. So the third topic I want to get onto, I teased it earlier, Drew, and I've titled this: "The Detroit Pistons look younger than the Dallas Mavericks and the LA Clippers, yet good." Detroit basketball is back, Drew. At least that's what they're telling me out here in these NBA streets. 6-0 record so far in November after last night's win. Another 46-point performance, was it, from Cade Cunningham, and a triple-double. This team have just got it rolling right now. What impresses you the most about these guys?
Well, first of all, they're 9-2, number one in the East, and they're off to their best start in 20 years. So shout out to that organization for making them relevant again. And Cade Cunningham is a bona fide superstar. It feels like Nike is starting to pivot towards him, with everyone else saying they don't want to be the face, with Anthony Edwards and Ja Morant, and them not really wanting to pivot to a European. And he seems to be next in line. But when you are a good offensive rebounding team, you get to the free throw line, you don't turn the ball over, that equals success usually. I mean, they're the number one effective field goal percentage in the league and number 3 in defensive rating, so they're getting it done on both sides. And Cade is looking like a young Mike. He had 43 shots tonight. There are only 2 other players who's had that many shot attempts under 24 years old. Can you guess the 2?
Oof. Would one be Mike?
Yes. The other one should be easy. Who else would take 43 shots? What other guard?
Oh, Kobe.
Yeah. 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 So he's in great company. Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant are the only players under 24 years old to take 43 or more shots. And
Incredible.
he's doing his thing. He was just named player of the month on Monday. He's averaging 25, 4, and what really impresses me, which is really surprising me, I don't know about you, but it's the 9.8 assists. I didn't think he had that playmaking ability, but he's showing that he can. And him and is it Jalen Duran? Like they're
Yeah.
becoming a nice little tandem. And the NBA is better when the bad boy Pistons are relevant.
Absolutely, and there are some bad boys on that team. We've got Beef Stew, Isaiah Stewart. We've got Ron Holland in there, who feels like he just came out the draft and was starting fights straight away. They
Yeah.
definitely have that bad boy element to them. But I want to focus on those two standout performers you've named there as well, Drew K. Cunningham and Jalen Duran, because they really are the heartbeat of this team. I've loved Jalen Duran's game since he came into the league, but the leap this year is clear, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him end up in most improved contention. I'm pretty sure, I'm not sure after last night's stats, but he's averaging like 19 points per game this season. He got another 14 rebounds last night, and he was averaging 11 rebounds a game before that. So, a walking double double of a center. You've mentioned the 2-man game he can have with Cade there that allows Cade to get his two, and Cade is right up there. I think he was third in most improved last season as well. So you're right to say it feels like he is a bona fide star now. And I wanted to pose that question to you, Drew. Like, why not Cade for face of the league? What would be stopping him? Because maybe Ja Morant, when we were looking at him, was on a more up and coming franchise in terms of the Memphis Grizzlies in all of our estimations at the time. Maybe because Detroit have been a bad team for so many years, and I guess an unlikable team for even longer, dating back as far as the days of the bad boy Pistons. Like I still feel like you say the words Bill Laimbeer and people around the NBA like scoffing in disgust because of how much they hated that Pistons team. But like, why not Cade Cunningham for face of the league? This is a guy who I'm going to support what you said there. I think he's a bona fide superstar.
Yeah, if I play devil's advocate, right, when you talk about face of the league, typically, historically, it's someone that with the full package. You think about Michael Jordan, the smile, same with Kobe Bryant, the personality, and uh, I can't even remember thinking or of going back to one time where I've heard him speak. So if that's a knock, it's probably that. I wouldn't be shocked if a casual fan didn't know who he was. That wouldn't shock me. Obviously because he's buried in Detroit, but most importantly, just because he doesn't have that personality like Anthony Edwards that really stands out, and you want to gravitate to Ja Morant, who you want to be like. Like if it's going to be Cade Cunningham, it's going to be what's the draw, right? There's always have to be a draw. You have to want to play like somebody. You got to want to be like someone. You gravitate to their personality. I'm not really sure exactly what it's going to be with K, but that's why the people at Nike get paid a lot of money, right? That's for them to kind of push out this persona to us to make us fall in love with them. So I'm interested to see what direction they go with his branding.
Yeah, absolutely. It feels like that's what Adidas have been able to do heavily with Anthony Edwards. And Anthony Edwards does a lot of that for himself. If you've seen Starting Five and his conversation with Barack Obama, then you know exactly what kind of personality Anthony Edwards is. He's the
Yeah.
truth, as he tells Barack Obama, which is a very funny moment for me. But I want to go back to the Pistons, Drew, just for one final point, because we referenced before, it feels like a theme that sort of runs through this agenda with these three teams today. Is this a team that doesn't shoot the three ball well, albeit the acquisition of Duncan Robinson has helped them out in that sense. Duncan Robinson is an absolute knockdown shooter, but it finishes a lot of the rim. It's very aggressive on the defensive end. You referenced some of the stats in terms of effective field goal percentage and defensive rating there. Like I just wonder whether this is a further sign of a new era in the NBA where young and athletic teams are rising to the top, and even above teams that shoot the skin off the ball. Like we reference whenever there's a team that shoots the three ball well, that they can win the maths game. And I look around the league and I don't see any teams that do shoot the three ball well but don't do the other stuff inside and aren't young and athletic that could win that maths game against a team like the Detroit Pistons, who are going to defend well, are going to compete every night. You're going to have guys who are going to get in teams' faces as well. Like I'm looking at like a Steph, for example, and Steph could still put up 50 on incredible efficiency and shooting from deep. But if a guy like Stu is switching on him to guard him out of the 3-point line, or a guy like Ron Holland is, and he's like beating Steph up, then I don't know if Steph Curry can have that physicality at the age he's at now to compete with that kind of thing. I don't know if him getting beat up by a guy like Ron Holland or a guy like Stu Pott is gonna get him over the line.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at their roster right now, and when you look at Isaiah Stewart, Marcus Sasser, Jaden Ivey, Asar Thompson, Ronald Holland, Kay Cunningham, and Jalen Duran. You know what they all have in common, Josh? They were all drafted by Detroit. And you know what that reminds me of? It reminds me of OKC, right?
Nice.
We know about OKC and how, all of those players you see there mostly are homegrown. Shea was obviously, traded for, but all those other guys were drafted by the plethora of draft picks that they've been able to collect over the years. And when you look at Detroit's roster as well, like I get that same kind of vibe. Obviously, they brought in Karis LeVert and Tobias Harris, but with the main core, those are guys that's been developing under their umbrella for all of these years. We know how important chemistry is, and to me, that's value. Being for the same organization, same team. And I'm sure that these are conversations that these guys had 2 or 3 years ago when they were rookies in the league, or first-year guys, of them saying, hey, let's be the first group to turn this around. And now you're starting to see it. Someone like Cade, who you haven't heard him talk about anything of wanting to be traded or not happy in Detroit, which usually – when you go through that much losing, remember, Detroit lost 28 games in a row. So that's enough in today's era to start the rumblings of a superstar wanting to go to LA or a big market, right? But you haven't heard that with Cade. And so obviously they're doing something great there. They've built the foundation, and now, those seeds are beginning to blossom.
Yeah, absolutely. And shout out to JB Bickerstaff as well, because I'm not sure if we've referenced him so far, referenced a lot of the players, but he's coaching his face off at the moment with that franchise. So yeah, absolutely. Respect to him, respect to the Detroit Pistons. 3-1-3 basketball may well be back. Let's move on, Drew, to our understated story of the week. I'm always happy to go in whichever order you like with this, Drew. So do you want to go first, or do you want me to take the rock and get next?
Go ahead. I want to piggyback off of you. I want to see where you go.
Okay, all good. Well, for my understated story of the week, I was actually going to reference it last week, but funnily enough, it is carried through this past week as well. It's Norman Powell in Miami. I feel like I was a positive homer last week. I'm going to be a downer on the Clippers, I'm afraid, this week, because Norman Powell in Miami continues to impress. He's averaging just shy of 25 points in November on 43% from deep, and adopting that aggressive style that has Miami looking so good while the Clippers look meek and old. So I'm sorry that I'm down on my team this week, Clippers fans. If there are any of you listening here, if there are, go and check out my Clippers podcast as well. But I used to think that Heat culture, Drew, to be honest with you, was like just basically a team full of guys that nobody liked, similar to that Detroit basketball thing, where it was Jimmy Butler felt like he embodied that for me, where like he loved playing the villain. Nobody really liked him except for Miami Heat fans, and you'd surround him with guys like Markieff Morris, for example. It felt like guys who were just getting fights and wouldn't actually contribute anything meaningful in basketball terms. And suddenly it looks like if this is Heat culture still under Spo this season, that guys like Bam Adebayo and Norman Powell, what they have is they're very likable, but they're aggressive basketball players. They let their ball do the talking. And Norman Powell, one of the things I loved about Norm when he was on the Clippers is that sort of, his ability to mix and match with his offensive game. It's not just shooting 43% from deep. If Norm gets, guarded off the 3-point line, he'll go past the guy and he'll dunk at the rim. He's aggressive in that sense. And that feels like a thing that the Clippers are missing a lot of this season. And Norm is a guy that's very easy to root for, from San Diego, played at UCLA, but was never like a 5-star recruit coming out of college or anything like that. He's got the, a sort of strange build almost for a basketball player, really, where he's got the length and he's got the bowed legs and things like that. So he's got that kind of athlete build, but not necessarily natural for a basketball player. And yet he can get up, he can dunk, he can take you down on the dribble as well. He's got sneaky playmaking abilities. He's a guy who has a lot of different things as a smaller guard, really, a sneakily good defender because of that length too. So yeah, shout out to Norman Powell in Miami. Shout out to Miami in general for what they're doing, and especially Coach Spo, who's had a tough week with house fires and things to deal with. But one of the things I love about Spo, and we've talked a lot about culture in this episode, really is it feels like the culture in the Miami Heat organization always trickles down from him, and he doesn't have the easiest boss to answer to in terms of Pat Riley. And I think Pat has wanted to get his kind of culture across more often than not, and that's how you've ended up with rosters that have been pretty unlikable. But I think the reason the Miami Heat have always been, a passable basketball team and not necessarily a lottery team is more so to do with Coach Spo, who always coaching his face off, and always, likable within himself, even if the team is not. But this team is very likable.
Yeah, good shout. The Clippers could really use Norman Powell at the moment. Wow. Yeah, what a miss. For me, I'm gonna go to the home team, the Houston Rockets, and I'm gonna make you aware of Reed Shepherd because we've
Yes.
heard all the noise last year. He even played in the G League, questioning him being the number 3 pick or number 2. Can't remember which one exactly he was. But even this season, first 2 games, he didn't play well. Again, a lot of noise with Vlan going out, and the media questioning who was going to step up in that. But over the last 4 games, Little Reed has really stepped up. I mean, just recently, the game that I covered on Sunday on Amazon Prime against Milwaukee, it was him that changed the game, because that was a game that the Rockets had no business winning. And I said it on air that, with championship caliber teams, when you look back at the season, there's like 5 to 8 games you look and say, man, we weren't supposed to win that game, but we somehow found a way. And that's how I felt about the Rockets with Milwaukee on Sunday. And a lot of that had to do with Reed Shepherd. He changed the game. He had 4 steals. A lot is talking about his defense or lack thereof, but he's actually improved in that area. He's really active. He has a 3.0 steal percentage while shooting, 47.9%. And for those that don't know what steal percentage is, because they have all these new metrics now, and I'm having to educate myself on them because there's so many, and basically it's a percentage of opponents' possessions that end with a steal by a player while that player is on the court. So that's been Reed Shepherd, and he's just shooting with confidence. He's starting to look like the kid I saw in Vegas 2 summers ago. When I went to Vegas and I saw him in Summer League, I looked at my buddy and I said, he's the best player here. The same Summer League that Bronny was part of, that Bronny really stunk it up. Reed Shepherd was the best player in the entire Summer League. And so he's starting to resemble that a little bit more every time he shoots now. I feel like he's going to make it. And so shout out to Reed Shepherd.
Yeah, absolutely. Shout out to Reed Shepherd. I was getting cross on yours and his behalf, really, Drew, at the start of the season when the Rockets lost to OKC, and was that double overtime or just one overtime? I think it was double in the end, wasn't it?
Double, yeah.
And people were calling out Reed Shepherd because he'd had like a down game, and I was like, it's the OKC Thunder. Like, what are we doing? Why are we judging a guy off one game, let alone one game against the best team in basketball? It felt very unfair at the time. So I'm pleased to see and hear from your point of view that he is doing much better since then. But we'll move on, Drew, to our bold predictions. I felt like I just edged the predictions on last week's episode. I'm going to give myself credit there compared to compared to yours. I felt like I just edged them, but this week I took an absolute hammering. I predicted my Clippers would beat the Oklahoma City Thunder, and though they kept it close for the best part of three quarters, as they always do, the Clippers, they absolutely let me down in crunch time in that fourth quarter. And then, good enough, my understated story, the Portland Trailblazers from last week beat the Oklahoma City Thunder in the next game.
Yeah,
So
huge.
I must have sensed in my spirit that Oklahoma City were losing that week. I just picked the wrong team. You could say that for the team that I support, unfortunately, as well. But Drew said the Jazz would go 3-0, and it started so well with a late use of Nurkic putback to beat the Celtics. But then Walker Kessler went down with a season-ending injury,
That was
which
crucial.
put paid to Drew's prediction. They lost to the Detroit Pistons, which there's no shame in. They got bounced by the Timberwolves, who, by the way, seem to just be able to put up nearly 150 points like it's nobody's business. And they lost to them again last night. I think it was 120 the Timberwolves put up last night in a slightly closer game. But Drew, I'm saying we need to do a lot better with our predictions this week. So what are you going for your bold prediction this week? Give me something. Come on, let's go.
Yeah, you got to put an asterisk on mine last week because I thought Utah was really going to get there, but with Kessler going out, that was just too much for them to overcome. So we move on, and I'm actually going to go back to the team we talked about at the top, the Dallas Mavericks, who've been stinking it up. And Wednesday, they're at home to Phoenix. On Friday, they're at home to your LA Clippers. And on Sunday, they're at home to the Portland Trailblazers. And I say, this is the moment that the Mavericks get back on track. Anthony Davis possibly back to the lineup this week, hopefully. But it better be the week, because if this is not the week, you got a 3-game homestand. You got some easy winnable games there. If you don't take care of business there, then it's going to be a long season. So I'm going to say Dallas Mavericks go undefeated this week. They take care of business, Phoenix, LA, and Portland Trailblazers, and they get out of that last place lottery situation. I mean, because really, they're only like 3 wins out of the play-in, so they're right there. I mean, it's early days. You know, Cooper Flag has the talent. He's number 1 on the rookie ladder. I don't know why, by the way. But, yeah, Dallas Mavericks turn things around this week.
Yeah, it seems like you are committed to my sadness at the moment, Drew, which is fair enough. I think I am as well, because my bold prediction is going the other way after being such a homer last week. And with an eye on there being 4 50-point performances already this season, and Jokic not even being in the top 25 yet for single game scoring this season. He's just won the Western Conference Player of the Week, so he's going to be feeling good as he plays the Clippers this week. And usually the Clippers have got quite a good plan to deal with Nikola Jokic. If you look at the last 5 games, I think he's only got over 30 points in one of those games. Ivica Zubac generally deals well with Jokic. I'm going to say that doesn't happen this week. Zoo has been a worse rim protector this season. The drop-off has been clear from him and the LA Clippers. Unfortunately, I'm saying that Nikola Jokic drops 50 on the Clippers. I'm not looking forward to that game of basketball. I'm going to need my Clippers to pull it out against the Dallas Mavericks, Drew. Otherwise, I'm going to be a very, very sad man the next time we come to record. But that's going to be it for this recording. I want to say shout out to Drew Lasker for doing this past midnight. We're coming up close to 1 a.m. now in Drew Lasker's world in La La Land. Drew is deliriously tired after a day of travel and a day in Los Angeles, and going to Intuit Dome and chopping it up with Coach Ryan Schmidt and the Atlanta Hawks, doing it all on the court, leaving it all out on the court, as Drew Lasker always did as a player. But I'm going to leave it to him to take us out of this episode. Drew, lead us out.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thanks again for tuning in. And after being up for 28 hours, I've dove on the ground for loose balls. I've got deflections. I've protected the rim for you to get back on here to bring you the goodness for week number 3. Now it's time that we say goodbye and I go get some sleep. But nah, honestly, we appreciate the support, guys. Keep it going. Make sure you go subscribe. Tell a friend to tell a friend. Like, leave us a comment. Get engaged with us on the social media channels. Until then, you know this NBA, they come thick and fast. There's news lines every single week. But guess what? Josh and I will be here to cover it all. Catch you guys later. Peace out.